well do you think that the proposed National Energy Guarantee could deliver all three of those requirements for clean, affordable and reliable energy? And if the National Energy Guarantee went ahead, would Labor modify the policy when it's returned to government at the next election, and if so, how?
It's on.
Thanks very much for the question. The problem with the National Energy Guarantee is that it's not a guarantee, and the detail isn't there yet. That's the truth. What you've had is, from the Labor Party's perspective, we support a price on carbon. We think that that helps drive change through the economy, and we were our preferred model was an emissions intensity scheme. An emissions intensity scheme is essentially a closed trading system between energy providers that ensures that the drive goes to renewables, essentially, is what would happen. I think it's agreed, and it's also agreed by both economists and the energy sector itself that it would result in lower prices. The government ruled that out because there's not only a lot of climate skeptics, there's a lot of market skeptics as well in the government, and sometimes the two things seem to go together. We then had the process of the Finkel Review, and the chief scientist, Australia's chief scientist, brought down a proposal that included the clean energy target. So we said as a party, well, we're prepared to have a look at that as the option to drive that change through the economy. Now, as a result, I think in part of the revolt by the right wing of the Liberal Party, the sort of Tony Abbott forces, to put it simplistically, you have had that rejected by the current government. The problem, it's a bit like the debate that we had though with the renewable energy target a few years ago, whereby people were saying you need to go higher, but the entire sector was saying we're dying, what we need is certainty. The renewable energy target, what we saw during that period after 2013 with the change of government, was a 94% drop-off in investment in renewables. So in the end, we frankly compromised in order to get that certainty, because that's what industry wanted us to do, the renewable energy industry. With the latest proposal, the so-called NEG, I think they could have thought of a different acronym other than something that sort of stands for negative. But we want to see what the detail is. There are two arguments, frankly, and it depends upon the structure of it. One is that it's a system that could be ramped up. That is, that you could put higher targets in. Once the system's in place, you could do that. The truth is, we're 2 years away from an election. The election, we're just 1 year since we had an election. We have elections every 3 years. The election will be, anyone who thinks that Malcolm Turnbull is about to jump off a cliff and call an election next week is, I think, gravely mistaken. The election has to be sometime in late 2019, but I suspect it probably is going to be sort of mid-2019. So during that period, we can't really afford for the entire industry to collapse. That's the problem that we have. But we want to see the detail. We're consulting with, obviously, Labor's in a position because the current, the proposal relies upon delivery by state governments, and Labor's in government everywhere except for here and Tasmania. And the Tasmanians go to an election early next year. So at the moment, it was pretty clear when the policy was announced, and we've been sitting the last 2 weeks. We asked a whole range of questions, didn't get that many answers. So the truth is that we haven't finalised a position because we can't, because we need to do that on the basis of fact. But we need to do it also on the basis of making sure that we do what we can. A precondition would be that we would need to be certain that we could ramp it up using that mechanism. Now, some people, I've spoken to people, including, there are some good people on the expert committee, whatever they call it. There are some good people who actually understand climate change and understand that we need to have a serious response to it. This government, though, isn't serious about a response because Malcolm Turnbull simply is constrained by the dynamics in his party seem to be driving everything. So when he speaks about bipartisan support, it's not Malcolm Turnbull, it's not Liberal Labor, it's Turnbull Abbott. And that creates a big issue for us, but we'll certainly consult. Mark Butler's in my electorate next week, having a consultation about that.
Thanks very much. I've got a question because someone came to me in the break and said, could I ask a question about the Western Sydney Airport? The people may be in favour of a Western Sydney Airport out there, but does it have to have no curfew? What about the issue of the curfew that's proposed?
500 protests.
Please, Jefferson. Okay. Hang on, Jefferson. You'll get a chance. You'll get your chance. You'll get your chance.
Shut up, please. Shut up.
Thanks. The issue with a curfew at Western Sydney Airport is, my view is, having given I live in Marrickville, to put some context here, if my house was as close to the runway at Badgerys Creek, it would be on the site. This is a very big site. It is an example of good planning because since 1984, the area around the airport has been protected from development because of the controls that were put on it. The runways, first runway 1, which is built, it'll have 2 parallel runways eventually, but at first when it opens it'll have one runway. The one runway to the southwest affects no communities whatsoever, none. It's hard to argue with that analysis. But the fact is, if you look at a map and you go to Badgerys Creek and look at the site where it is, that is a fact. There is not a single community within many tens of kilometres to the southwest of the airport. Last year, between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. at Kingston Smith Airport, there were, the person who said bullshit, how many takeoffs do you think there were at that time last year at KSA?
I know that you get them at night, but what you're not even recognising is, I know from the EIS, I will have flights at 1,500 feet over my house if they put them in. We don't even have the luxury of noise modelling because all flight paths are off. I mean, it is just incredible.
You will have, under the process that I established, like every single airport will have to have an EIS for every flight path that is there. You have currently at KSA, people would not know this, there were over 4,000 flights between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. at Kingston Smith Airport last year. When you operate at very small modes, on the member for Grantley, you know how many complaints I've had in the last year about flights between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m? 0. Not one. Not one at Kingston Smith. And if anyone here has complained, then show me the email. Not one. 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. because when you operate at very slow modes, in terms of 4 or 5 an hour, you can actually, with modern day aircraft, put exactly where they're going to go and ensure that they don't go over people's communities. I don't want to see any community in Australia suffer from aircraft noise. I get it, but the truth is that in terms of Western Sydney Airport, I'm only the opposition, not the government, but you can have a flight path that ensures that no one is impacted. There's not a single town or community along that route, and you can have takeoffs and landings from the same spot as you do at night out through the bay at Kingston Smith right now.
Okay, keep that.
Brett Whittaker, Labor Party member. I hear that there's quite a lot of argument going on between the Liberals and the Nationals on the viability of the, I think they call it the fast train, but it's the freight train that goes from Brisbane down to Melbourne, out west. Could you outline your attitude to that?
Yeah, look, this is the proposal for inland rail, which would go essentially from Toowoomba down through Narrabri, through Parks, down through the Murrumbidgee irrigation area down to Melbourne. When we're in government, it essentially is a good proposal, the idea that along our coasts is where there's enormous congestion of both passenger and freight transport. If we can have some of that occur inland, given today's topic of social justice and infrastructure, it's a good example. What it will do is transform Parks, for example, is on that north-south route. It's also on the east-west route to Perth, to Western Australia. And if we can create jobs in Parks, in that regional city, and make it grow, then the potential jobs that are there in terms of the logistics sector, in terms of, because it's on the intersection, could be potentially enormous, and there's been investment waiting for this to happen. The concern that's there from some of the Nats is the way that the government has handled the route, which has gone straight through. The concern is essentially it goes across floodplains when it's in the sort of Narrabri, Moree area around there, the sort of northern part of New South Wales. Now the government needs to get it right. We upgraded a lot of the lines. We contributed something like $600 million to the upgrade of the lines that we did simply through straightening the lines. One of the things we did as part of the economic stimulus, didn't get any votes for it, no one knows about it, but we actually reduced the time between Brisbane and Melbourne for freight by 6 hours and the east-west route by 9 hours by putting in concrete sleepers rather than wooden sleepers, by straightening the steel, and by taking out some of the curves that were there that forced the trains to slow down. Why is that a good thing? It takes trucks off the road. that makes roads safer, that increases productivity, it saves lives, it's a good thing to do. So we generally support the project. Inevitably, there will be, whenever you build an infrastructure project, including the inland rail line, there'll be people who have properties resumed, there'll be issues with it. It's a matter of having proper, though, community consultation and getting that right. But overall, the project is a good one.
Okay, next.
Hello, my name is Louise Neary. I'm from Glee. I just have one question. Other members of your party, including Lisa Singh, David Finn, Peter Collier, and Terry Butler, have all said that they're dead against the Albanese coal mine. But I understand it, you still support the coal mine as long as it doesn't see public. Why won't you join your party colleagues to say that you're dead against the coal mine?
Can you point to a single statement that I have made? You've just made an assertion that people think is, clever to do so. Can you point to a single statement that I have made in a meeting, in a radio interview, on TV? I sort of come along, I'm sort of what you see is what you get. On what possible basis do you say that?
Well, I'm prepared now to say that against coal mine.
On what possible, but no, that's not what you said.
No, but you haven't said that you're...
You came along, you produced, frankly, a pamphlet.
Don't pick on her, tell what the Queensland Premier.
Please be quiet, Jeff. Jeff, you have to go.
Jefferson, I just said that you should get the next question. Maybe I was wrong. So, just
wait.
Chill. You just made a statement. That I support Adani on the basis of what? You're the one who just made the statement. Where have I said that?
With your votes.
With your votes?
With your votes in Parliament.
Well, there has been no vote in the Parliament on Adani. I have here the Hansard of and you have this childish, you have a pamphlet. Why people who call themselves progressives think it's smart to mock up a photo of someone, mock that up,
Jeff, please.
the trolling of people, which is what that represents. I'm a progressive, I'm on the left of politics. I don't believe that that's an appropriate action. You think it's very smart to, engage like this. There are claims made there in that. Point one. And I've met with Climate Change Roselle Balmain whenever you have asked to meet, and I've engaged in a mature and professional way. And frankly, I'm disappointed that you think, well, you're holding it up.
I'm holding it up. Offering you the opportunity.
You're holding it up. Here is the Hansard.
To speak to this
Here is the Hansard.
Please wait.
Here is the Hansard of that debate. You know what the debate was, and you will not find anywhere me voting on that issue at all. What you will have is the only time in this entire term where Labor has got an amendment adopted, and it was moved by Mr. Burke, and it said this: the House notes the following amendment was carried by a majority of members. The government failing to protect the iconic Great Barrier Reef by A, failing to act on climate change, supporting the Liberal National Party in Queensland and blocking reef protections. It is, I won't read it all out, but that was the amendment that was carried. There is no reference. What happens sometimes in Parliament is this, that someone will come along and move some irrelevant amendment and have 3 or 4 people vote for it, and there's a division. Because there's been no consultation and because of the processes, it's not voted on. I didn't even know that had happened in terms of this nonsense argument that's put. Have a look, the vote is Tuesday, 15th of August 2017. Look it up for yourself. But I'll say this, why people think that it advances the cause to attack and to target progressives, be it Jackie Trad in Brisbane or progressives in Melbourne or in Sydney, why they think that advances the cause is beyond me. The fact is that the Adani mine was approved in terms of the EIS processes, not by any Labor government, federal or state, by the Newman government and by the Abbott Turnbull government. The one process that we have some influence over is the issue of infrastructure and the loan for Adani, which the current government and advocates of it have said that they support. The environmentalists who came and met with me, like I meet with Balmain, Roselle Climate Change, whenever they have asked, and every group in the area, whenever they have asked, came and met with me, the one thing that they wanted was to say this, that if the mine doesn't get the government backing in the form of the loan, then it won't go ahead because of the commercial issues with the loan. The commercial issues with the loan exposes the fact of the economic issues with creating a new mine that will just result in the replacement of one lot of coal, potentially at best case scenario, with another in terms of the Hunter Valley and a replacement, not additional. The fact is, the economic analysis done by people like the Australia Institute shows that Adani stacks up if coal is at $100 a tonne. Coal is at $50 a tonne. India have a policy of no imports of coal towards the end of this decade. They will stop it before any mine is occurring. India also has a policy of 40% renewables by 2030. They're the facts of what are occurring. And why people think that it's smart to make things up, as they have, look for yourself. 15th of August 2017. The fact is, there is only one federal government decision with regard to the Adani mine, and that is the rail loan. And we have said, and I as the infrastructure minister, shadow minister, have said we are opposed to it. So why people think it's smart at a time when a coalition government is kowtowing to not Malcolm Turnbull but to Tony Abbott is running the agenda, and they're talking about government-funded new coal-fired power stations, I think exposes, frankly, the political agenda that's here. And it's been done before in the lead up to the last federal election, and guess what? I'm still sitting here because as the member for Grainler, and I got a swing in spite of the fact that some people who regard themselves as on the left of politics targeted me, didn't spend a cent in Reed next door. There were 14 billboards in Grainler in the last federal election. We have a parliament whereby if Barnaby Joyce loses his seat tomorrow, they're down to a minority government. And the so-called progressives who want to campaign for the Greens political party to replace progressives like me, if they had not had 8 people handing out at Leichhardt Town Hall, but maybe sent 2 of those across to Concord, we might have won Reid and we might have won Banks if they'd have just bothered to go across the border rather than targeting Linda Burney and Barton as well. So people can make up their mind whatever way they want, but I stand by my record, and the sort of assertions that are made that the person who asked this question just made and can't back up, because there is nothing that she can point to anywhere that backs that up. Now, with regard to the second point that's made on that leaflet is about native title. And I'll tell you about native title with regard to the issue that was dealt with in the Parliament. Quite frankly, I'll listen to Pat Dodson and Linda Burney and the Indigenous community leadership of Australia who came to us and said that because of what had happened with a legal decision, that essentially said that if native title agreements were questioned by within not a majority decision-making process, but if there was someone saying, hang on, I disagree with that, and I'm a traditional owner, I'm a TO, and I disagree with that decision. What happened was that we faced a very difficult decision. And I listened to the Indigenous leaders in this country who I respect, including Pat Dodson, the father of reconciliation in this country. And what was occurring was that if that legislation had not carried, every native title agreement in the country would have been vulnerable to defeat. And I tell you, and so it should have been, someone says. Well, you can take that position, but let me tell you, the idea that the Indigenous community is homogenous has a term for it. I won't use it, but there's a term for it. And if you want to argue that that's the case, then you don't understand Indigenous politics. One of the reasons why, when I go, and I was a front bencher on Indigenous affairs for a while, and I learned to say even the boundaries of where Indigenous nations are can be an issue from time to time, and it would have all opened up. And the native title agreements, done not by accident, done because of Eddie Mabo with the Mabo land claim, done because of native title legislation with Paul Keating and Gareth Evans fighting through, you know, the Senate sat for days on end. And people come along, frankly, from middle-class privileged backgrounds and say, how dare you back up native title? Well, you know, fair income. And you put out a pamphlet that has on it, one, a Hansard that doesn't stack up. Here it is. Anyone can come and have a look. There's no vote. There's no record of my voting in it because it was irrelevant. Because frankly, when you're one member out of 150 in the House of Representatives, I don't take a great deal of notice of what that one member does. Because the reason why I'm in the Labor Party is because I want to be a part of government. I want to sit around a cabinet table, not organise protests against cabinet decisions. I want to make them. So that's the first point. So no one even knew that it happened. And his amendment, the Adam Baird amendment, was to delete the Labor Party amendment that actually got carried in the Parliament. That got carried. That's the first point on that leaflet. The second point is native title, and quite frankly, I'm with Pat Dodson, not with the person who asked the question, and I'll live with that. And the third issue is, because I'm about making decisions, I sometimes don't have the freedom to say whatever people just want to hear. If people want gesture politics, they can get gesture politics. That's really easy. You know what I'm about? You know why I came straight here from Canberra? You know why I'll get up at 4:30 tomorrow morning to be on the Today Show at 6 a.m. and then go to Frank Kelly afterwards? You know why I do that? Because I want to make a difference. I want to make a difference. And if you're serious about political change, as a left-winger and as a progressive, then guess what? You've got to be about things other than stop and don't and no. You've got to be about what you're for. And what I've done, what I've done isn't sit around. I got bagged for not going to a meeting in Newtown that wasn't in my electorate. Well, I got bagged for it. I was in Rockhampton. We've allocated $1 billion to tourism infrastructure jobs. The people of North Queensland want to know that we're serious about creating jobs and economic opportunity. So I had to sit in Glebe and say that doesn't matter. If you're serious about national politics, you know, this sort of crap that people think they're so clever with, you know, drawing up photoshopping, you know, oh, we'll get to Albo, we'll get under his skin. Well done, you know. But we had, the other thing I did that appeared on Lateline was with Bob Catter, go to Kidston. Kidston's 537,000 solar panels. To meet with them about solar energy, to go to Kennedy number 1 and number 2 projects, to go to, at part of what it will do is to use the old gold mine to provide hydro, so that you have essentially that continuous reliable power for 1 million homes. I got Bob Catter on national TV on Lateline supporting renewables, not coal, not a coal-fired power station. I did that. You're busy attacking me. Good luck with it.
Okay, here goes Jeff. That's okay.
My name is Jefferson Lee. I'm a frequent contributor to Chatham Now. I wrote a 4-page article on the Glebe ALP member John Dengate in the most current issue. I've also circulated here a copy of a petition about the removal of 17 bus stops from the 445 route that goes through your electorate, even though you're a federal member, and I'd like people to keep circulating it. Jamie Parker only drew it up after I got 20 shopkeepers in Rozelle to ring in his office and complain. So there's no bias in terms of Greens and Labor. I'm the convener of the Stop the privatisation of Sydney buses, which are 51% guaranteed thanks to the union members to be sold to a French multinational. I'm identifying who I am. I'm also the convener of the second referendum on conscription. Right, my question's the same one I asked you last year, and I would bid the chair to not let...
If you ask the same question, you might get the same answer. I say that before you asked it.
I bid the chair not to let Albo use this as a parliamentary debating chamber so we can get through a few more questions.
Please ask your question.
A few more questions. It's not a Labor Party faithful rally here. It's a politics in the pub. Now my question is, given the...
Question, please.
Thank you, Labor Party stalwarts. My question is, given the fact that Philip Adams last night interviewed an expert on counter-nuclear weapons missile technology to point out that if the Koreans do decide to bomb Darwin, where the Labor Party, according to Albanese, supports the US alliance that's built up of military
Question.
and Pine Gap, where the Labor Party supports cluster bombs and drone warfare conducted through Pine Gap over the last 12 months. My question is, in terms of foreign bases, are you going to make a stand, or are you going to allow the new airport to become another defence base with 500 people opposed to new airport last week?
Thanks, Jeff. Well, no, just wait.
I support the new airport, and it won't be a defence base. There's a defence base at Richmond. It will move people and freight.
Pine Gap, Albo. Darwin and Pine Gap. Darwin and Pine Gap.
I think you got
an apologist for the Yanks, aren't you?
I think you got a crack, mate. I backed you up. I asked them to give you a question.
Tom Loren opposed the Yanks.
Hey, Jeff. Cool it.
Foreign bases.
Cool it.
What about Australia?
Cool it, Jeff. Jeff, let him answer.
Stand up. Stop attacking your lefty opponents if you're not prepared to stand up.
Jeff, thanks. See you later.
Tom Loren will be rolling in his
Ask your question, please.
My name is Lawrence Toll. I listened intently to Red. The AGL replied to the government on what they were going to do. As a business making commercial decisions for long-term interest of the shareholders and their customers. I was very impressed. The major focus is on renewables, and they're getting guts into it. Irrespective of what this government does, would you believe the business industry will go ahead and follow exactly what AGL is doing, make decisions for the long term, and straight into renewables?
Absolutely. And what's happening out there is that, and I mean that's why the sort of my previous long answer was a response to sort of I guess a debate that's like, hello, you know, the world's over here, but you come to the inner city of Sydney and there's a different debate. The world is supporting renewables. Business are supporting renewables. People are voting with their wallets and putting solar panels on their roofs. Technology is moving, I think, faster than we can envisage. You think about the pace of change that has occurred. You know, the whole concept of battery storage. The Kidston plan I spoke about before is incredibly exciting. It's pretty simple. An old gold mine, taking water, essentially moving from one end of the mine down to the other and back, and creating hydro energy that stores it. And the company that we met with there listed on the stock exchange I think the day after they were listing, and the late line took a while to put it on TV. But you know, they were oversubscribed for investors. So people are voting with their feet, with their wallets, and businesses are engaged in the issue. So I think essentially you're right. What we need to do though is to make sure that in terms of policy responses, I just caution that period in 2014 where you did see this absolute drying up of capital. Some of Kidston and the Kennedy project, the North Queensland renewables projects, was driven in part by ARENA and some funding that was required in terms of loans. But with, I think, a little bit of goodwill, and we're seeing AGL, the classic example is the Dell coal mine. So, power station, sorry. You have this debate, just think about sort of 6 weeks ago in Parliament during this current session. They had, I reckon every second Dixer was about Liddell and how the member for Hunter, Joel Fitzgibbon, and a whole bunch of people don't support Liddell extending its life. And you had the company, you know, called to Canberra, and you had all this show. They're not talking about that now because it was a nonsense. Because it is at the end of its life. The truth is that coal-fired power stations, a whole range of them in New South Wales and in across the nation, are nearing the end of their life. With Liddell is a good example whereby they have said it will close in, I think it's 2022. So you have that certainty created for a lot of the workforce. Some of them will retire, some of them will move to the other power station that's there in the Hunter. But in the meantime, in terms of the output, the generation will be taken up. AGL have a plan of taken up with renewables. So you don't shut off coal overnight. That's the truth. If you just said no coal tomorrow, the lights go out. But you have a plan for a transition. Gas is a transitional fuel, but it's renewables in the long term that will, through innovation and already what we're seeing, will transform and drive the economy. So the government is trying to capitalise on the high price of energy, and that's a real issue for families out there, for battlers, for people who are on fixed incomes. And we can't ignore that, but we need to engage in the real debate that's going on energy policy. But I'm very positive and optimistic about the future. I'm optimistic about Labor in government making a substantial difference. I think that Mark Butler is an outstanding human being who has a policy grasp which is consistent with moving towards climate change targets. And I'll say this, in spite of the fact that we lost government in 2013, our target of 20 by 2020, that when we announced it, was ridiculed in 2006, ridiculed. We did it at the Lendlease building, 6-star, the first 6-star building in Australia, with myself and Kim Beazley was the leader at the time. And people said that's just not achievable, in spite of every effort of Tony Abbott as Prime Minister. We're still going to get to 23, I think, pretty easily by 2020. That pace of change happens quicker than we think.
Okay, next question is...
Hi, my name's Adrian Saunders. I'm a Bankstown resident.
You're a good man.
And I certainly concur with what you have to say about the infrastructure, particularly in Sydney. We were promised, the whole nation was promised the broadband network back in 1996. Those costs blew out. Telstra abandoned the project. Before that, it went from being a fibre optic network to a coaxial network. And it feels like 20 years later, we're going exactly down the same route. We've spent billions of dollars on a rollout of what is going to be ostensibly the same thing again. By the way, I'm not an activist. I do suffer from optimism. And then, we have the projects, like you say, WestConnex and so forth. If you go down Canterbury Road, which is basically a major arterial route that runs on one lane, and you can see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of apartments being thrown up there with absolutely no concern for infrastructure. And there's one over the road here. There's a one-lane street. So my question is, whilst I agree with the majority of what you have to say up front, we've got 5 layers of government, and we've got infighting in all of those layers of government. Are we right to hold out any hope? And I ask that just to take a position and see what you have to say about it.
Look, thanks, I really appreciate the question. I think we are. I think one of the reasons why you're on the left, it's one of the reasons why I get disappointed by some on the left who are so concerned with negative politics, is that to me, the essential belief is a belief in humanity, a belief in collectivism. That's what drives me. And humanity moves forward. I think often, you'll find people will say to me, if I can illustrate it this way, people will say to me, the good old days when Labor stood up for values. And I say, well, we used to support the White Australia policy. We didn't have any women in Parliament. My predecessor, Jeanette McHugh, was the first woman elected to the House of Representatives from New South Wales in 1983. We went 83 years of electing only men. Labor, Liberal, Independent, only men. 83 years. Think about how fast that change has moved through in terms of change, whereby now in the we're at 40% plus federally. The leaps are backwards, but that change has happened, and they've been bagged for it. It would have meant that the Menzies government were bagged for not having women in the cabinet, or the Howard government. Now it's an issue. We have in the federal parliament Malandiri McCarthy, Linda Burney and Pat Dodson. 3 amazing Indigenous people, representatives, who aren't just there to talk about Indigenous issues, they're outstanding people on issues across the board. And incredible representatives, all 3 of them. So I think you think about environment. Tommy Wren was Labor's first environment spokesperson. Before the late 1960s, we didn't have one. We didn't have one, nor did anyone else. So in terms of policy debates, one of the things that I think is that we're now in a debate, not a debate, we're having this silly voluntary postal survey about marriage equality. When I was first elected, in my first term, I was the first person, not the Green, I was the first person to move a private member's bill related to sexuality in the House of Reps or in the Senate, about superannuation entitlements of same-sex couples. And I did that because I thought that's how I think change happens. You pick an issue that defines it. You don't yell and shout. You pick an issue that then leads people to go through other issues. So in this case, if I happen to be if John happened to be in a same-sex relationship with Peter, he couldn't transfer his money, his superannuation to Peter, but if he was in a relationship with Mary, he could. Everyone acknowledged that was a bad thing. But you know what happened in the Labor Party caucus? People sort of shifted uncomfortably in their seats. People were talking about sexuality. And people, I found out afterwards that a whole bunch of people said, I didn't know Albo was gay. Because why else would you raise it? That's what they thought. And you look at the 78ers were arrested for marching at Mardi Gras. Now everyone wants to be in it. Businesses are sponsoring it. You have the marriage equality debate to finish. People say, why didn't you just do marriage in? Goodness sake, we did more than 80 pieces of legislation that made an enormous difference to people's lives on migration, on social security, on health, on all of those issues. The unfinished bit is marriage, and it'll be carried. 75% of Australians have voted already, and a majority will vote yes, I'm very confident. And before the end of the year, that would have been just unforeseen in 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I mean, it wasn't even an issue. I'm not sure, people won't sort of come out to me when I was first elected and saying, I want you to fix up marriage. They'll come out to me and saying that there were real circumstances whereby, still with the AIDS crisis dealing through, they weren't allowed to sit in a hospital with their partner while they were dying. They were just, horrific circumstances. And now the nation has shifted. So I think one of the things about being on the progressive side of politics is, it's really easy to say stop, no, don't. What we're going to say is for. We're going to actually put forward a vision that embraces people, because you won't win on negative politics. You won't win mocking up, getting someone to mock up a photo of people. Like, really? We're better than that. And progressives, the nature of progressive, it's forward. It's not back. And it's positive, not negative. So, all power to you.
One more question.
Get involved in something, not necessarily a political party, but social movements and stuff. Your participation here is a part of that as well.
Your question.
Captain Darby, Telegraph.
Matt, please.
Okay,
What's your question?
So, my name's Katrina, I'm just a local resident, and I'm sorry because I don't want to point any fingers or add any heat to the debate, but I do want to talk about the Carmichael mine and what is the way forward. As far as I understand it, the Turnbull government does want to give $1 billion of public money to this private enterprise. And as far as I know, the Queensland state government is quite happy for that to happen because they see it as, that they are sort of touting the Adani line about how many jobs are going to be created. And I understand, that jobs is an issue, and so it's great to hear about, the other initiatives that are happening. But what I would like to know is, can the Queensland state government, can the federal Labor put pressure on the Queensland state government to veto that loan? Or what else could be done to stop that loan from going ahead so that does not become a reality?
Yeah, look, good question. It's purely a decision of the federal government. One of the things that I've done this week, for example, I don't expect to read about it on the website of people who'd rather mock up photos, but we did, well, we'll see how you feel about it. One of the things that we did this week was ask the departments that were, including Infrastructure Australia, in Senate estimates that's still meeting. I've probably missed a couple of calls because it's still meeting now, about whether they had received an application. They hadn't. Now, the legislation that established the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility that was carried through the Parliament, $5 billion has been established in this fund. Not a single dollar has gone out of the fund at this point in time. The only expenditure has been for board meetings, etc. Now, the NAIF has, as part of the legislation, as a result of an amendment moved by me in the House of Reps, not carried because we don't have numbers, but carried by us in the Senate, is that the Infrastructure Australia board need to be consulted before any loan can be approved. That is, it has to be a project that stacks up. And one of the problems, as you'd be aware with Adani as a corporation, is issues with regard to its offshore holdings and the way that the company is structured, and the issues of whether any loan paid to it would be able to come back. So there's a fiduciary responsibility, to use the accounting term, on the board of the NAIF to go through that process. None of that has happened. None of it. On that level, we're continuing to raise those processes, but that would seem to indicate to me that they're not serious about granting the money. If they, while the spotlight is on them over that, and we'll continue to try to do that, then they can't get away with a breach of the legislation, because the board members in the NAIF, who are a bunch of business people who have other board appointments, etc., can't afford to be in a situation whereby essentially they're in breach of legislation is the law. So I was surprised this week when this is something that we've continued to push. We've continued to work with, the truth is, I've continued to sit down and work with serious people in the environmental movement at the national level about these issues, and will continue to do so because you know, I can't see how it possibly stacks up, because the basis of a loan is that it gets repaid and produces a return. With the price that's there for coal and with the projections that are there into the future on coal, I can't see how it can possibly stack up. And so in terms of, you know, it mightn't be as simple as sort of what people want, but in terms of producing an outcome, the hard yards in terms of economic analysis, in terms of ensuring that that won't happen, and therefore the implications of that, given what they've said themselves, that without that loan the thing falls over, our objectives are to actually achieve outcomes here, and we'll continue to do that. I think it's very clear that a majority of Australians understand that there are real issues across environmental, economic and other issues with this. Some of the employment issues have been, you know, inflated. One of the things that we've been trying to do by making a very early announcement about the $1 billion for tourism infrastructure. Bear in mind, $1 billion compared with what is being asked for in other areas. We've been out there doing that. We've been doing that, not in Glebe, we've been doing it in Rockhampton, Townsville, Cairns. I've been to all of those cities, as well as Hewenden and places you've never heard of, campaigning on those issues about jobs and where future sustainable jobs will come from. For example, the Hewenden Kidston project is about jobs for 50 years into the future minimum, and potentially forever. You know, in terms of the construction jobs that are being created now, but those long-term jobs. So engaging in those issues is important, and that is what I've been doing, and I make no apologies for it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anthony. That is it. We've come to 8:20 or later. Yeah, but after that. So I think we should call it quits, because that's the rules at Politics in the Pub at the Harold Park Hotel. Please show your appreciation to Anthony for his